Hi everyone, welcome back to SmugMug Live. This is episode 39 of SmugMug Live. Thank you for joining today. I really appreciate it as always. I always start with the same old things, but if you want to support this channel, please hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell notification. That way you'll be informed of all the episodes we release here on SmugMug Live. As always, this whole channel is brought to you by SmugMug and Flickr. If you are looking for somewhere to share and store your images, for somewhere that you can have an e-commerce solution or have an incredible website, or indeed if you're looking to find an incredible community of photographers that will inspire and motivate you, then check out everything we have to offer at smugmug.com and flickr.com. This is the last episode of the week. It is Friday, of course, so moving into a long weekend for many of us around the world. Whatever you're doing this weekend, have a great time. But today, it's all about a dear friend of mine, Conor MacNeill, is joining us to talk about the state of travel photography. We'll have a look at his work and talk about how things are going under the current situation with the pandemic and what the kind of future looks like. But as always, before that, give yourselves a shout out in the chat window. It's always great to see where you're tuning in from. And of course, at any point today, if you have any questions for Conor or myself, then please put them in the chat window and I'll make sure to get to them at a relevant point or at the end of the show. So give yourselves a shout out in that chat window and I will pull them up on screen. But for now, let's see if Conor is with us. Hi, Conor, are you there?
Yes, I'm here indeed. Although before we start, I've watched so many of these on YouTube now that when you were giving your spiel that you give at the start of everything, my brain for some reason thought that I was watching it on YouTube again, and I was following along and nodding and thinking, "Ooh, can't wait to see who the guest is this day."
Well,
and then
surprise!
It's me, and I'm like, "Oh,
it's you!"
it's me.
Surprise!
Yeah.
Were you about to go start typing in the chat window and asking?
I was about to, hi from Northern Ireland, as I do every time, but it's actually me. I can still say hello to myself.
Yeah, we'll give Conor MacNeill a shout out. He's tuning in from Belfast today, I believe.
Yes, sunny Belfast. Sun's just come out after a day of rain, as always.
I'm just thinking that between my Scottish accent and your Northern Irish accent, we may need subtitles on this
episode. I was thinking that earlier, yeah. At least we can understand each other.
Excuse me?
We can understand. Oh, you got me there. You got me.
I got you.
Half got me.
Yeah. Well, I'll just put my best international accent on, as I always try and do, so that people can understand as much as possible of what I'm saying. We've got a few folk tuning in. Hi to everybody in the chat window. Keep your shout-outs coming already. We've got John Brown is in the channel. John, like yourself, Conor, is a frequent watcher of this channel. Comes from an incredible place called the Dog Pound, just somewhere I've always wanted to go. He's actually come straight in with a question for me.
Okay, that's for you.
Which is cool. John, hi John, how you doing? He says, hello from the Dog Pound. Alistair, I'm curious, as a long-time Flickr user, have you done any tips and tricks or Lightroom Flickr episodes? Well, yeah, I mean, this is SmugMug Live, but it's brought to you by SmugMug and Flickr. And when we have guests on, they're both SmugMug users and Flickr users, like Conor uses both our products. So yeah, we'll definitely do episodes that are relevant to Flickr, especially as we start to add things and iterate on some of the feature set at Flickr. I'd be delighted to do that. As far as Lightroom, we did an episode of SmugMug Live where we demonstrated Lightroom to SmugMug, which we have a plugin for. But yeah, we can definitely get some interest in Lightroom and get some people in to show you that. In fact, I believe Conor might be doing some Lightroom stuff today. Is that right?
Yes, if people are interested in that, then I can certainly show my techniques and processes and workflows. Even the organization. There's a lot of things that people overlook about sort of the whole editing process in photography. A lot of it is honing your actual workflow, putting aside the technical things. It's the steps that you go through, and that's different from every person. And
indeed,
it can take years to actually get somewhere that you're happy with, and even after that, I spent years perfecting mine and then threw it out the window and started again and adapted and changed. And you're never 100% happy with how you do things, but that's the point, is you're always continually learning. And as software updates, you update your own workflow. And anyone that says that they're completely happy with the way they're working isn't probably truthful. They're most of the way there, but there's always something that you can improve on and learn from others, no matter who it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great comments coming in already. Alistair McKenzie says he's watching to see Conor in action. Conor was the British Guild of Travel Writers nominated judge for the Global Travel Photography Awards and the Global Travel Media Alliance Awards this year.
So glad you had to read that, not me.
That's a lot of letters in there. But yeah, thanks, Alistair. Yeah, you've definitely been judging a lot of work this year. So for those that might not know you, Conor, how would you describe your photography work?
I would probably say more of a sort of travel destination landscape photographer. I normally say travel photographer, but I don't do as many sort of people shots and lifestyle shots as you may expect from a traditional travel photographer. So I then sort of refer to myself as a destination, where I'm a landscape photographer, but who travels the world, or used to travel the world, and show off different locations, different destinations. So I think that's probably what I would do. And, as well as landscape, some architecture and astrophotography and associated genres with landscape.
Yeah, cool. I'm going to, actually, let's see, I'm going to pull up your website here, just so that as you're talking about your work, we can scroll through some of your images. So there, you're travel and destination photographer, some incredible images on your website. I've always been a huge fan of your work, Conor, as you know.
Thank you.
This shot in particular, this one, The House of a Thousand Colours, one of my favourite shots. I love that. That one actually hangs very proudly in the headquarters at SmugMug. We have that on the walls at SmugMug. It's a great shot. I love that one.
Oh, it's one of my favourites that I've taken as well. And it's become quite a popular location for photographs. It was before I did it, but in the last few years, it certainly piqued people's interest.
Mm-hmm. And there's Namibia. I love Namibia.
Yes,
The trees against the dunes. I love that. Incredible. This shot I recognise because this one made Explore on Flickr recently, right?
Last week I think that was.
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah,
that on the Explore page on Flickr, which is great. So you're going to these destinations. What's the reason you're going for? You're a travel destination photographer as a living. So how does Conor make a living from going to all these cool places? Because we all want to do it, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I never intended really on becoming a travel photographer. I got into photography sort of maybe a decade ago. Borrowed my boss's camera when we went on a road trip. Me and a friend decided to drive from London to Istanbul and back again.
As you do.
As you do. Just we wanted to drive to Asia and then back. No point, but I brought, this DSLR with me and really enjoyed the taking of photos. And more than that, this trip, so we're staying in a different country every day, different language, different currency, different cultures. And I really enjoyed that. And I thought, I'd really like to travel the world and sort of see all these things. And the problem was when you're trying to organize with friends to go away, there's always someone, I can't do this month, or, I can't make it this time. Can we postpone it for this length of time? And you end up putting it off and off, that you never really get to go away. A lot of you've probably had that thing where you're wanting to go on a trip and no one can quite get the time to go with you. So I thought, well, I'll travel on my own. But then I got worried, what happens if I get bored? And then I thought, I'll buy a cheap DSLR. And then if I get bored, I can spend my time taking photos and doing all the nerdy stuff that comes along with with sort of digital photography. And so my photography then sort of came from a love of travel, which is how I became a travel photographer. You know, I was a traveler and then a photographer. And then as I sort of traveled the world, just on holiday mostly, and started taking photographs and getting more and more noticed, then, you know, some work would start to come through, or people would say, can you teach some workshops? And that's how the sort of career developed from that. It wasn't in a way that I'd planned out. It was just
wasn't a conscious decision to be
not at
a
all
travel photographer.
It's just something I did part-time for fun. And then maybe about 6 years ago, I ended up losing my job in London because the company got bought over and half the workforce got let go.
Yep.
I thought, well, if there's any time to, you know, chase your dream, as it were, now's the time to do it. So I started running photography workshops, putting my name out there saying, you know, I want to be, you know, shoot for tourism boards and things. In fact, a lot of people want to shoot for tourism boards and travel companies, but they try and shoehorn their way in.
Yeah.
You know, I've even got a few friends that said, I want to be a travel photographer like you. I have lots of, you know, photos on my social media. And I'm like, but your social media has London in the name and all your photos are of London. So, you know, why would a travel company hire you? You've got to kind of aim for the job that you want.
Yeah.
And luckily, because my photography came from a traveling background,
from all the travels,
then I had a portfolio that matched the type of work I was looking for and the type of work that people wanted.
Yeah, we've had many conversations on SmugMug Live and on the Photography Lounge podcast, a little plug for our podcast, the Photography Lounge, with a lot of our guests about the importance of personal projects, where you're creating this work for yourself, but ultimately you're creating work and then showcasing the type of work to attract the type of clients that you want. And you've actually just done exactly that. You've went on travels and photographed travels and destinations, which is then what you're showing on your site. It's what you're showing as your portfolio. So you're then attracting the type of client that you want, you know?
Exactly. In fact, a lot of my portfolio work comes from my personal holidays and my trips with other photographer friends or on my own, where you have the time to chase those portfolio images, which is something, if you're trying to get into travel photography and you have a good portfolio, especially if you're a landscape type of photographer, you've really got to explain to your clients that, you know, I can go away on a trip and take sort of 4,000 images and maybe process 10 of those, and 2 of them might be portfolio worthy, you know, and sometimes I have to wait in a place for, you know, 8 hours to get the right light or the right conditions that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And then a client will hire you and say, we want you to go here for, you know, 18 hours and get a couple of portfolio images. And you're like, well, I can get you good images, but if you're expecting the things you see on the website, you may or you may not, because as a landscape photographer primarily, you're at the mercy of the light and the weather, and if it's emptying down for the 2 days that you're there, there's nothing you can really do about it.
Yeah,
you can get some moody images, you can edit as much as you want, but
you can only get what you're given within that short window. So what is so you've mentioned a few things. You've mentioned shooting for clients like tourist boards. You've mentioned workshops. So is that your business model, and I guess print sales as well, right?
Yes, to some extent print sales, though recently that's not been as popular as it used to be, I think, because print sales are becoming more accessible to everyday people now. So even a few years ago, you had to find sort of a good printer and, you know, calibrate everything and, you know, decide what you wanted. And even with something like SmugMug, where I sell all my prints, when people sign up for that and, you know, upload their photos, with the click of a button, they can get their own prints, which I think a lot of people are accessing. I think that's great. I have my own over there somewhere. I have my own photos on the wall. so people are less likely to buy other people's work. And I think that's fine. That's fair enough. But workshops are definitely a big part of how I get my income, and that was a very decisive decision. It was a very whatever the proper phrase for that would be, because when I started getting into photography, and sort of the photographic social media was really hitting sort of its heyday with Instagram, and I'd been a Flickr user for years, and it was really taking off at the time. And sort of a lot of photographers saw it as competition, especially on social media, where they're getting a certain number of followers, and I take better photos than them. They shouldn't have this success. And it almost became, from some people, it was a bit nasty and competitive. And for me, I looked at that and I thought, these people are going to take photos, they're going to post them on social media, and a lot of them are excellent photographers. Instead of competing against that, why not teach them to be better photographers and work with them, and sort of rising tide lifts all boats, as it were.
Yep.
So I thought, I want to teach people how to become better photographers, and the knowledge that I've gained over the years, why not impart that to people? And if they end up better than me, great. That's a good recommendation for the workshops.
Absolutely.
And obviously I want everyone to come away from the workshops a better photographer than they were, whether that's in the field with composition or picking scenes, or whether it's in the classroom side of things with the technical ability and the editing and the Lightroom and the Photoshop. But I think everyone can really learn from a workshop, and and everyone should be striving to make themselves better, whether that's YouTube videos or books. Are books still a thing? I think they are, ebooks.
Or watching SmugMug Live. Yeah.
Watching SmugMug Live. That's how I've learned over the last few months. Couple of months.
Yeah. How long has it been? I can't remember. I've been doing this. Feels like I've been doing this for years, but it's only
we're episode 39.
39, a few a week. No. So 20 odd weeks. So you mentioned we've been talking about your workshops, and a few people giving their shout out in the comments. One here is when Nag from Norway here attended Conors workshop in the Faroes last year. So
yes.
Yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed that. Nigel Cooper says, long time Flickr user here, loving this. Hi Nigel, thanks for joining us. Michael Murphy said he can relate. He's trying to plan a trip to Georgia, but I think that was when you were talking about friends not knowing when to go or when they could.
Yes, he was planning that trip with me, and we've never quite managed it.
So there you go.
It's been 4 years, I think, in the planning. Every few months we message each other and say we should really go to Georgia for a photo shoot in the mountains.
Yeah.
As in Georgia the country, not Georgia the state. Although I have nothing against Georgia the state.
Yeah.
I think it has peaches or something.
Yeah, but Michael came back with another question, and if you're posting questions, a few of you are doing it already, especially those of you that watched the show before. But if you're going to post a question, start your question with the word question. Makes it very easy to find it in the chat window. But Michael said, you're obviously not traveling during lockdown, which is something I want to get into in a second. But are you still practicing by going out and taking photos and processing, or is that old? Is that on hold also?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, and one that I didn't actually give to him to ask. I should have given some questions to friends to ask.
Michael's a plant.
I know a lot of photographers that are going out locally and taking photographs and keeping their eye in. I am not one of those, not in the slightest. My camera has been in its bag since November, I think, December.
Wow.
I think, I've shot a few things around Northern Ireland before, and I've got some shots that I really like of them, so there's less impetus for me to explore. And plus, when you're used to, not in a pompous way, but when you're used to traveling the world and seeing amazing sights and things like that, going to your local park and shooting some squirrels or something like that, just doesn't have the same energy.
Doesn't do it for you. No disrespect, probably, Belfast.
Yeah, it would benefit me to probably go out and shoot things like that, but
yeah,
it's just. And again, I think with lockdown, people started lockdown, not sure what to do, and people were a bit lazy, and then suddenly people were like, "This is the time to get loads of things done." So. People bought photography gear or sports gear, bought their dumbbells and their kettlebells. And I thought, I'm going to go out hiking every day with my rucksack and go up mountains and hills. And that lasted about 2 weeks. And then I think everyone kind of got lazy. And
dumbbells are sitting in the corner.
Yeah, we don't know how long this is going to go on for. If it was 3 weeks, people would be exercising every day for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But people aren't going to exercise every day for, 6 months. When they haven't.
Very quickly.
Yeah. So
you've not been photographing. So we'll come to the kind of, I titled this "The State of Travel Photography." We'll come to that in a second. I wanted to talk about this first of all. I'm gonna show your this is your Flickr site, which is where I first discovered you. Was on Flickr. Again, we've showed this image. This is the one that was on Explore just the last week. Phenomenal image. But I want to talk about the name, The Fella.
Yes.
Everywhere, all your handles, everywhere from Flickr to Instagram to SmugMug, everybody knows you as
my website.
Your website, The Fella. Where did that come from?
It is obviously short for The Fella Goes Arctic.
Oh, of course it is.
Yeah, so I think that should explain it.
The Fella, is that famous band?
It's a famous band. So years and years ago, I was a musician. I played sort of bass guitar and a little bit of rhythm guitar and samples and, drum loops and things like that. And I was as everyone who's, sort of 16, 17, I was in a rock band for a while. And then our drummer moved to Australia. So it was me and the singer-guitarist, and we started messing around with samples and, computer software had just reached that point where you could easily make tunes on your computer using Cubase or Fruity Loops, as it was called back then, FL Studio as it is now. And so really enjoyed just the two of us making all this music. But the problem was that when you have sort of music that's just using samples and instruments, there's no lyrics, so it's really hard to think of titles for your songs. So one day we'd just finished a song, we really liked it, and we thought, what should we call it? So we thought we'd just alternate between each other and shout out a random word each. So I think he went the, and I went fella, and he went goes, and I went Arctic. We went, okay, that's the name of this song. And then he stopped doing the electronic stuff and I carried on, and I thought, right, I'm going to use this as the name of the band, which was just me.
Yeah.
But people typing in The Fella Goes Arctic every time gets a bit tiresome, and most people in the world seem to not be able to spell Arctic. They miss out the first C. And write Arctic. Yeah. So that just got shortened to The Fella.
The Fella.
And I got the domain, and then I got into photography, so my site became a photography site, and then everything stemmed from that. So it's a bit of a long-winded thing, and there's no great reason. It's from a random word association, basically.
It's not nearly as exciting as I'd hoped it would be.
No, not at all. But
you'll have to come up with a much better story than that, So
it was when I was in Indonesia, and there was a big fight between rival gangs, and I leapt in and beat everyone up. And all the onlookers went, oh, look at that cool guy, fella. He's the fella. And I was like, yes, I am.
That's what we'll call it. That's what we'll call it from now.
That's what I meant to say before the nerdy stuff before that.
Yeah, that's cool. But I thought it was interesting to talk about that. I've never heard the full story behind that. I knew it was something to do with music.
We were saying the other day that a lot of photographers are quite into music.
It's incredible.
Creativity.
It's incredible the number of photographers I know who are particularly guitarists. Playing guitar seems to be very, very popular amongst photographers, myself included. I'm a guitarist. bedroom hero.
Yeah.
But I know lots and lots of top end photographers who have music somewhere in their journey to this creative outlet.
Yeah. So there's a similarity between the
parts of the brain,
the oral and the visual parts.
Yeah, must be the same creative desire somewhere in the brain. But I never made it as a rock guitarist that I wanted to be. So I went into photography.
I didn't make it as a rock bassist either.
Not
that they're anywhere near as cool as a rock guitarist.
No, definitely not cool. Let's talk about the state of things. So you're a travel destination photographer. You also do workshops. Everything that involves traveling and being together with other humans at the moment is on hold. So it's probably been I know it's been a very tough year for all photographers, but particularly if you're a travel and workshop type photographer. So I'm assuming it's been pretty brutal over the last few months.
Yes, yeah, but I mean, a lot of the cancellations, me and my team, Zoe and Jeff, have decided it's for the best. So at the start of the year, when the pandemic was sort of in people's minds, but it wasn't serious at first, we were thinking, should we run these workshops? Should we not? And then as the severity started to grow, we thought, no, let's postpone them all to the end of the year, because, by September, October, things will be back to normal. So we postponed everything, and then sort of middle of the summer, we were thinking, well, I don't think this is going to be back to normal. So everything that was postponed to the end of this year has now been postponed to the start of 2021.
Yep.
In the hopes that everything will be back to normal by then. But again, they could be pushed, a few months beyond that. And unfortunately, no one knows, and there's no point guessing about it. And the idea is just to be as sensible as possible. If you're running workshops,
absolutely,
you've got to think about people's safety and don't run them just to earn money, but you've got to protect people. And as a photographer that might want to go on these workshops, you've got to have some critical thinking and say, is it safe for me to travel? Do I have the time in case I get quarantined?
Yep.
Is this workshop, is it going to be 50 people in a classroom all sitting together, or is it going to be 6 people all spread apart? So I think how workshops are going to be run in the future, at least the next couple of years, will probably be shaped a lot by this pandemic. And you might even see, we always kept ours very small, sort of 10, 12 people.
Yep.
But I know a lot of other photographers that ran sort of 60 people in big groups, and I just can't see them happening again. So in a way, I'm glad we ran the more sort of bespoke workshops with the small numbers.
Has that made it easier to, from a business perspective, has that made it easier to reschedule them when you don't have hundreds of rooms or dozens of rooms that you're having to?
Oh, definitely. Especially when you're going to more remote places, even sort of going into the Isle of Skye. There's a fair number of hotels there, but they're not big hotels. They're always very busy. So if you're all in with 40 people, you're going to struggle unless you've booked maybe a year in advance sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially at the key stages of the season where you want to be there, it's going to be tough to get a room.
Yeah, so we've actually built up relationships with, a couple of hotels there, and we always let them know. As soon as we know, we let the hotel know, look, we're going to have to push this. Or even if the hotel comes to us and say, we're not ready to take that number of guests, then we'll work with them and say, okay, we can try and push it back a month or two and see. And what a lot of people forget about in sort of all aspects of life and photography is building the relationships and the long-term relationships with people, even something as simple as a hotel or a catering company or something that's providing a service for you. Because when things get difficult, like during this pandemic, everyone kind of needs to work together. And if someone has a last-minute cancellation or postponing because of it, there's nothing anyone can do about that except work together.
Yeah, it's very important in any form of or genre of photography. The other vendors and suppliers that you work with those relationships are critical, and you need to work as hard on those relationships as you do with your customers sometimes, because they they can lead to a lot of work or be critical in the success of the work you have. So I guess hotels and travel companies are no different from that. So the workshops are obviously postponed until you feel safe to do that. And as far as client work, I'm assuming that completely dried up as well.
Completely dried up. I mean, I had quite a lot of client work lined up for this year. It was one of the busier years. But as the year started to go on, things would be postponed and then cancelled. And, especially like I had quite a few jobs in Norway. And Norway have done very well with their response to the pandemic.
Yep.
And they don't have a dense population. So it would probably be quite safe to go there. But then you think about it's the traveling between them and going to the airports, and what happens if I'm the person to bring COVID into Norway. Plus, with a lot of client work for my style of shooting as well, it's working with tourist boards, whether that's a national tourist board or a local tourism board, and they have to think about their reputation, and rightly so, they want to be on the safe side of things, and they'd rather make sure everything's completely clear before bringing the photographer over. I find that reassuring that a lot of those clients have cancelled things, because especially even a couple of months ago, if someone had said to me, "We want you to come over here and shoot this," I probably would just say no, because I don't feel safe, and I think it's irresponsible for them to be asking people to come over.
Yeah.
When there's a lot of travel bans, and just because somewhere is just open doesn't mean you have to rush there. If anyone's been watching the news in the UK, you'll have seen that people will rush out to, say, Portugal, and then 2 days later the government will say, actually, you'll need a quarantine when you come back. So then everyone rushes back, just before the quarantine, and then somewhere else will open, and people will rush out there. The same thing keeps happening again and again.
Yeah, I'm not desperate to travel that much that I'm going to rush anywhere, but it would be a PR disaster for a tourist operation, or the tourist board to bring COVID onto a country by bringing someone else in to take some photographs and stuff. So it's not surprising that that type of work has been put on hold.
Yeah. And even on the boring side of things, when it comes to the often overlooked thing like insurance, maybe your insurance is invalidated by traveling during the pandemic, or
that's a great point.
For instance, whenever we run our workshops, we're sort of teaching photography, but we're also driving everyone, around the islands or the mountains. So because we've got a group of people and we're driving them around and showing them, we're actually working as a tour operator, just the way the insurance works. So that's an extra level of insurance and responsibility. That you may not think of it, but you are a tour operator, and you're responsible for everyone in your group and their health and safety. We have health and safety forms that we fill out and checks that we do and send that off to the insurance company. And I guarantee there's probably a lot of workshops that are a bit more fast and loose with those type of things. And, normally that probably wouldn't affect anyone, but in this time, someone gets ill with COVID and your insurance doesn't pay out and their travel insurance doesn't pay out, then, you're in a world of trouble.
Yeah, that's a great point. Insurance is important for all concerned, and it's interesting to see how, and people maybe don't check how traveling under a pandemic may be, not
I guess
covered.
It's never really happened before.
Yeah,
so
no experience
it's
doing
not a thing.
So. So we don't want to be all doom and gloom, but I know it's been a really tough time. What you've alluded to and mentioned some of the changes, but what do you think will be the main changes as we come out of the pandemic and go back? You've already mentioned potentially smaller groups and that type of stuff. Any other changes you think you might see?
You may see sort of certain groups or tour agencies or whoever, people running international workshops, you may see even restrictions based on either sort of nationality or country of origin or things like that. You see that already in general terms, where I think there's only a small amount of Americans allowed to travel to Europe at the minute. And the UK is not allowed to travel to some countries. So if you're running workshops, and say a lot of our clients are North American, especially from the USA. So if we want to run a Scotland workshop, will they be allowed into Scotland? Probably not.
Yeah.
So
probably going to be difficult for them at the moment to travel, even if you wanted to. Yeah. So smaller sizes, less opportunities to get to certain places. So you might have to plan different locations and change some of the destinations that you're going to.
Or potentially with the hotels as well. Maybe they have sort of stricter policies, or maybe they have to have only 60% full or 50% full. And then does that mean you need to book further ahead, or will the prices per room go up, or both? And again, speaking of prices, so when this pandemic ends, I really want to get back to work. I want to shoot for brands.
Yep.
But will the airlines still be there to bring me to these locations?
Yeah.
Will the airlines still be there to bring people from America over to Europe? There's already a lot of airlines that have gone under, some that need government bailouts. If this keeps going on, and even when this pandemic ends, not that it'll really end, but becomes more under control, like a lot of people are traveling now, but you and me, we're not keen to travel.
No.
So even when people think, oh, it's safe to travel now, you won't get a rush of people coming back. It will be a slow filter of people coming back when they start to feel more reassured. So even if an airline or a company gets through this, there's still a little bit to go, whether they'll survive that or not.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting on the price. The flights are pricing. It could go both ways. They could either entice people to fly by being competitive with their prices, but if there's less seats available on the plane, if there's less companies flying, so there's less competition, then we could potentially see the cost of travel increasing, and your costs as a business owner from a workshop point of view, the cost of hotels and stuff going up. It could have an impact still to come once we get back to actually working.
Oh yes, and then if I have to then charge 10 grand for one person for a workshop, no one's going to pay that. And then add on to that the fact that they might have to spend $2,000 on a flight over when it used to be $600.
Yeah.
It's these things we don't know, and it's beyond our control.
Yeah, your internet's breaking up a little bit, Conor, unfortunately.
Earlier, relationships with clients. Oh.
Yeah, sorry, your internet broke up just ever so slightly there. It happens during live shows. Sorry about that, folks.
So we're talking about relationships with clients. When I work with tourism boards, they'll actually have a lot of relationships with their flag-carrying airline. Mm-hmm. So they can say, right, we want you over to Tokyo. You can fly with this company or this company. But if that company is too expensive or doesn't exist anymore, or even if a tourism board, they're like, right, we want people to come back in. We want you to shoot this area. We want some marketing material to get people into, say, this part of Norway. I'm great. What can you pay me? Oh, we don't have any money because we haven't had any tourists for 6 months or a year. So then what do you do there? They might be dying to get photographers in, but not have the money because they haven't had the work.
Yeah, bit of a vicious cycle.
Then do we drop our prices? So then we're shooting for next to nothing for a tourism board that doesn't have any money, but then we have to spend 3 times the amount on a flight to get over there.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be interesting.
Interesting is definitely a word for it.
It's a word I've used a lot over the last few months. Is interesting. So
interesting and unknown.
Yeah. But listen, hopefully it does pick up and you get back to traveling. But it's a great insight, and I appreciate you giving us your thoughts and your honest state of what's been happening. There's a lot of people out there saying, "Oh, it's fine, we're doing okay and stuff," but photography industry has been hit very hard by that, and I know you personally have as well. So thanks for being honest about that and open.
Well, you can only be honest. There's no point lying about it.
We're all feeling it. We're all in the same boat. So
I think the fact about being honest is that other people that are in the same position can get some sort of solace in that. If I'm sitting here lying and saying everything is fantastic, I'm pretty much a multi-millionaire now because of the pandemic, there could be people watching this going, is it just me that's struggling?
Makes them feel
it's not just you. Everyone is. Well, almost everyone is having a hard time. And don't be afraid to say that or ask for help. Or, I always think, even as a travel photographer, sometimes it's good to have a backup job that you can go to during the quiet times.
Mm-hmm.
Even sort of famous, well-known photographers will often have other things to do.
Yep.
Whether that's something like a speaking gig or something completely different, like a musician playing gigs.
Yeah. If you can't be a musician, you could be a drummer. Also.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
A little bit of an in-joke there. Right, let's get some more of your photography back on screen, because I'm sure people are keen to see it. I'm actually going to show this image. This image I absolutely love. Just the mood. Is that Iceland? I think that's Iceland.
Yes, right? that's Snoggafoss.
Snoggafoss.
Yeah. It's been that long since I've been to Iceland or anywhere.
Absolutely incredible shot. There's just so many great stuff. I'd encourage anybody to go on your Flickr account and check out all this stuff. So,
in fact, this will sound like a plug for Flickr, which it isn't.
Great.
It is, but it isn't. But a lot of my photography journey, when I started learning, Flickr was the place to be. So I joined that and started using it for photography, and it has a fantastic community behind it. And a lot of the people that taught me photography and that I went on photography trips and photography walks are all from the Flickr community. In fact, Mike, that was sending in the questions earlier and talking about Georgia, he's one of my Flickr friends.
Yep. And
I've known him for a long number of years now. And we've traveled the world. In fact, I think he was on this trip. This was Jordan. Yes, he was on this trip.
To Petra. Somewhere.
Yes, to Petra.
Somewhere I've always wanted to be.
We find a banana on our gear stick. Just a little bit of banana, not a full one.
That is a place I've never had the opportunity to go to, and would love to go, because mostly the first time I actually became aware of the Treasury Building in Petra was Indiana Jones, the movie.
Oh yes,
can't remember which one exactly it was, but incredible place.
Yes, people of our age remember Indiana Jones. I think the younger generation, it's something like Transformers.
Is that what
something like that? They know it from that. But it's an amazing place, but it does get very busy.
Yeah.
So
as does everywhere. Well, when there's not a pandemic.
We might have bribed, might be a strong word.
Don't libel yourself here.
Yeah, found our way in early.
Yeah.
By monetary means. I think we got in maybe sort of 10 minutes early. And there's I think it's about 1.5 kilometers canyon to get there. And we sprinted as fast as we could just to maximize the amount of time. And we arrived just as they'd finished putting out the candles, as in not putting them out, but placing them down. And we were drenched in sweat, running around trying to photograph all these things before the crowds arrived. It was exhilarating. It was nerve-wracking because people could turn up any minute and ruin your shot, and conditions were perfect, and it was just this frantic rush to get everything done. And then finally people arrived, we got some decent shots, and you could sort of sit down and enjoy the performance that they give during those evenings.
Yeah, here's another angle of it.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Yeah, same trip, same night. Fantastic trip, and with two people I found from Flickr, Michael Murphy and Jimmy McIntyre.
There you go. So there's a few questions here before we get you to edit some images. Question from Michael. Is it hard to teach people who may not have the same camera as yourself when you're on a workshop? I'm sure you have all sorts of cameras on workshops, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. Very good questions today. Much better than the questions I would normally ask. It is very difficult, but the more you do it, the more cameras you see, so the easier it becomes. And also, I'm not afraid. No one should be afraid to say, you know what, I'm not too sure. I've not used this camera, but let's get the manual and let's both look up and see what we can do. Also, thankfully, I have a co-instructor that teaches with me, Jeff Bartlett, and he shot with a number of different camera brands, and I shoot with Nikon these days, but I used to, many years ago, I shot with Canon. So the main brands we've kind of got covered, and it's, it gives us some insight, and it's more, some of the problems tend to be with the entry-level models. So I'm a big proponent of using back button focus. I think it's great for landscape photography, but you can only kind of get that on the mid-range and higher, or maybe on the, the sort of smaller brands like the Pentax or Fuji or things like that. But when you get entry-level Canons and entry-level Nikons, you don't get something like that, and there's nothing you can really do about it, and just say, oh, don't use back button focus because you don't have it, which is sometimes tough because you've just spent sort of 10 minutes telling everyone how great back button focus is,
and then they don't have it.
And then they don't have it. I also, it's only after years of practice that you can say back button focus properly, because it's one of the hardest phrases to say, especially when you're teaching people. So many times at the start of it, we'd be like, back button. And people are like, why are you having a stroke in the middle of this classroom?
It's fine, they can't understand you anyway, so that doesn't make any
Only
difference.
You can, yeah.
Here's a question for you. What, or this is Cameron Weir, hi Cameron, says, would you be able to talk through the thoughts you have on how you create some of your shots before the taking of them and before the post-production?
Oh yes, yeah.
Maybe an idea, maybe a good opportunity to start sharing your screen, and we could have a look at some of the shots you've got lined up.
So I can go through. It might be easier for this question to go through some sort of general approaches to it. So let me share my screen.
Yeah, if you just go full screen on that, and then I'll bring it up onto.
There we go.
There we go. That's you.
Okay, so for instance, some old photos. There's a technique that I really like to use, where it's to do with exposure blending, but in a subtle way. So for this, is this shot coming up for you?
Yeah, we're seeing that. It's great.
Okay, so this is obviously New York. And I had an idea of what I wanted, and I was in New York for a couple of months. And every now and again, me and our friend Greg Annandale would be checking the weather and trying to see when the conditions would be right. And then for this evening, we thought this is going to be quite a nice sunset. Let's get down to I think it was the Brooklyn Bridge Pier. Someone might correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. So I went down there, and I had an idea of the shots that I wanted. But for these shots to work, you've got to think about how you're shooting and the post-production. So I knew that I wanted the long exposure for the water. Kind of even when I'm shooting architecture and things like that, anything with water, the landscape photographer kicks in, and I always like a long exposure. But that means that if I want to get the long exposure for the water and I want to get the sunset, I've got to make sure that I've got my composition locked in, because I don't want to be trying to line it up and move things around. So I'd spend a good while before sunset trying to get sort of the right composition that I wanted for both things. Then either doing a few long exposures to get them in the bank, or waiting for the sunset and shooting that. Because I know that I need to have those two things for this shot to work. And then on top of that, one thing that you won't notice until I point it out probably is that this shot looks normal, but it's actually 3 images in one. You'll probably notice that the water's smooth, and that doesn't go along with the clouds because the clouds aren't streaky as they would be in a long exposure. But I didn't like that effect when I looked at it, so I kept the clouds normal exposure. But the lights in the buildings wouldn't be on at this time because the sun hasn't set. You may get 1 or 2, but not that many. But what I knew from shooting a lot of cityscapes before is you can have an amazing sky and an amazing water and a good foreground, but in this kind of shot here, you'll only end up with a dark outline of the skyline, and that doesn't give quite the amount of depth. So maybe 10 minutes after the sun had set, all the building's lights usually automatically all come on, and then I take a photograph of that and then overlay that using a blend mode on top of the buildings and then mask out sort of things that I didn't want. But to get all that possible, I have to think, right, for this shot, I want the long exposure, I want the sunset, I want the lights, I want this composition, my camera has to stay here. And then when I go into the post-production, the editing, it's much easier to piece everything together because I've thought a few steps ahead. And even thinking those steps ahead, if I didn't like that, I can just use one of those images. I could just use the long exposure and edit that, or the sunset standard one and work with that. But by planning ahead and thinking these are the different pieces that I could slot into this puzzle, then that's how you've got to think about your post-production when it comes to shooting. And I've done this a few times, and it doesn't need to be obvious. That one's a slightly more obvious one. If I go to Mostar, which I believe is with Mike as well, this is a similar type of thing, a lot more subtle, but you've got the long exposure for the water, just to get those streaks and the smoothness and the reflections. You've got the sort of pastel sunset that's coming in, but then very subtly you've got the lights on the buildings under the bridge, which wouldn't have been on at the time that the sun was setting. So again, it's one of those things where you're just planning ahead and thinking about what you want to shoot. So people always think of it as
pre-visualization of it.
Yes, yeah. Very good
it's
phrase
a good word,
for that.
I like that word.
Yeah, it's good. You've got to. People think of editing and shooting as 2 separate stages of the photography journey, but they're very intertwined when you want them to be, when you're kind of getting into more advanced shooting. And that comes with not only exposure blending, but things like focus stacking, where you might know that this foreground object is going to be too close and you want this to be sharp. That's something you have to do while on location. It only really comes into fruition in the editing side of things. Or if you know there's something in the way, but if I move here, I know that thing can be minimized and then I can take it out using Lightroom or Photoshop in the editing stage. But as long as it's not covering something important that will make it obvious looking, then you can sort of frame your composition around things that you want to remove. See if I have any other examples. Yes, there was one of a waterfall here. Again, this is a number of shots stuck together, and in fact, this is one of the photos I use for an example about to always keep your images, even if you think they're not very good. Because I'd spent maybe a good hour shooting this location, getting the right conditions. I'd shot long exposure for the waterfall to get the milky smooth effect. I did the same exposure for the rock in the foreground, but didn't like the smoothness as much. So I, did maybe a second to get a little bit of smoothness, but some texture. But obviously working with all these long exposures, the wind was blowing because it's Northern Ireland and it's never that nice a day. And the leaves in the top left-hand corner were a bit blurry because they'd been moving during the 1-2 seconds. And I thought I need to find an exposure where these are still. And it turned out to be one of the exposures, the only exposure where they were completely sharp was an exposure where I had a big water droplet right in the middle. Now, normally I maybe in my younger days would have cast that aside. Oh, there's a big water drop there. I'm going to get rid of that. But luckily, that was the only one that had sharp leaves in the corner. So I was able to blend that in to get rid of the motion blur on the leaves.
Use that element of it.
Yeah. So unless a photo is completely unusable, my advice is to keep that because it could have some use, and it's not going to take up any room these days. And when you've got backup hard drives and large computers and online storage and even websites where you can store lots of gigabytes of photos.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, called SmugMug.
Yeah. Yes.
And a lot of times we talk about blending images or focus stacking, which is also just a blended image. Do you do that in Lightroom or do you do that in Photoshop? Are you able to show us the steps of stacking 3 images together, if you had any that you could show us?
I don't think I have any of those handy. It depends on the image. So for sort of panoramic images, I'll tend to use Lightroom because in the last few years, its panorama stuff has come on leaps and bounds. It's phenomenal now. As a lot of the times if I try it in Photoshop, it does this, as good a job, but run out of memory or take about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Because Lightroom can actually do it pretty quickly, and it keeps it within my workflow. Harking back to what we were talking about earlier, is that I find that if you're working on images in Lightroom and then you're jumping to Photoshop and then maybe back into Lightroom, it can break the flow. So I try and do as much as I can in Lightroom within reason. I call it my pre-post processing, where Lightroom will either get it to 100% of what I want. Say if I'm doing client work, it'll all be in Lightroom probably. But if I'm doing portfolio work, I will get it to 60, 70, 80% of what I want in Lightroom. And then I'll go into Photoshop for either exposure blending using luminosity masks and more advanced stuff like that, or to do the focus stacking. I'm not entirely sure whether Lightroom can do focus stacking these days, but it's pretty decent in Photoshop. Yeah. And I know there are some other separate programs that are fantastic at focus stacking, but I don't do the kind of macro work that I need that precision for. Most of my stuff is, I say simple focus stacking. If we go back to the waterfall, there's kind of an obvious break between the foreground and the background. So that's just, a simple blend. Focus stacking or an exposure blending doesn't have to be difficult. A lot of people will think of it as this super advanced thing. Or what I will tend to do is, I guess it's, some people call it double raw processing. There's a few different terminology for it, but sometimes when you're editing a raw file, you'll say, bring up the shadows and it'll look really good in the sky, but not very good in the foreground. In that case I will do is I'll make a virtual copy.
Yep.
And I'll edit the sky to make it look good, and then the other one I'll edit the foreground to make it look good. And then I'll bring them both into Photoshop and then merge them together. So it's odd because you're merging a photo together, but it's the same raw file. So it's just a way to pull out more information from one raw by separating it into 2 different raw files.
It's almost like bracketing after you've taken an image.
Yes,
you can bracket in camera, or you can edit the raw file into various exposures and then bring them together.
Yeah, in fact, I used to do sort of back in the days when I shot with the 5D Mark II. I used to do a lot of bracketing, even sort of 5, 7 brackets, shooting into the sun and things like that. But then, as camera sensors have got phenomenally better, with the latest, in fact, the latest of any camera brand really, has got phenomenal dynamic range. So you can pull out this info from one image. every now and again I'll do a manual bracket where, if it's very extreme, then I'll drop it down. But more often than not, you can just get everything from one raw file, and that's only going to get better.
Yeah, indeed. There's a question came in here from Michael. I'm actually going to go back to your Flickr account because Michael's question is, I see some photos in your stream of animals, for example, a deer or a zebra. How does planning change if wildlife is involved, or did you plan to capture those, or were they just happy coincidences, I guess, while you were traveling? So we've got, for instance, here, we've got all these incredible landscapes, and then there's this beautiful monochrome processing of a zebra, which is very appropriate. So how often does wildlife occur? Is it planned, or is it happy incidents?
Yes and no is the answer. It's never an easy answer with me. But should I stop sharing the screen?
Yeah, you can stop. Yeah.
So with that one of the zebra, before, when I was planning my trip to Namibia, I had an idea that I wanted to get a zebra crossing the road. And I thought a black and white one would be amazing, this sort of high key monochrome image. And it was almost a pipe dream. And I thought, I'm never going to get this, but it's at the back of my mind. And if anyone has been sort of to Africa and seen sort of, not on safari, this wasn't safari, but been around rural Africa, there are thousands of zebras, thousands of them. We had to wait 25 minutes for them to cross the road. There was just a line stretching off to the horizon of these zebras crossing the road. So I had, hundreds of photographs of this. Even though you think it's going to be very difficult to get, this was one of the ones where I thought in my head, this is something I want but I'll never get. Turns out it's super easy to get, and it just looks like it's going to be difficult. Whereas the other photo was of a reindeer, I think Mike said, a reindeer crossing the road. For some reason it's always crossing the road, which shows the laziness that I just can't be bothered getting out of the car. But the reindeer was actually when I was on a completely separate client shoot for a car company in Finland, in Arctic Finland, around Rovaniemi, Valo. And we'd spent a week shooting the cars in various locations. And this was on the way back to the airport to fly to some international hub. And as we're driving along in the middle of nowhere, these reindeer just started to come out of the trees behind us. And thankfully in the Arctic Circle there's not an awful lot of traffic. So we pulled into the middle of the road and I leant out the window and got this shot, completely unplanned, unexpected. We'd spent the good part of the week as well trying to find reindeer to get photographs of, and couldn't. They roam wild, but they're not wild because they all have tracking collars on them.
Yeah.
But there's, if you've ever been to sort of Finnish Lapland, it's expansive and it's desolate, and there's no way you can find a reindeer without local knowledge. And yet, on the way to the airport, suddenly there was one there right in the middle of the road. And luckily, I always travel with my sort of camera in my hand, ready to snap a photo. This one was just prepared. Always prepared. This one was just opportune.
Yeah.
In fact, there was one photo of a castle. I don't know whether it's on. I think it's on my Instagram, but not my Flickr at the minute. Where it was a great snowy castle in Austria, I think. And I just got this in the taxi on the way to the airport. I think through the window as well. We just happened to be driving past, and I thought, that looks amazing. Leant down, lens against the glass in the door, and took the photo, and it turned out okay.
Don't tell anybody that though. It's hard. It's hard. Yeah. And
so some of my.
If you ever want reindeer photographs, I can find you some up in the Cairngorms in Scotland. We have some reindeer wandering around up here. The Reindeer Centre up in the Cairngorms, pretty awesome place.
So a lot of my photography is meticulously planned, and a lot of it is complete luck.
Yeah.
But if you're just relying on luck, it's going to be difficult. So, you still got to do the planning. Yeah. You can't be that lucky.
The harder you work and the more prepared you are, the luckier you get.
Yes. Always keep your camera battery charged.
I think we're getting near the end, a little bit past the time. But question here from Cameron says, you have a number of great black and white photos in your portfolio. Do you know, as you're planning the scene, that it's going to end up as a black and white or color composition?
Again, very good question. I never really plan in black and white. I think it's difficult because we don't see in black and white. Like the zebra one we just talked about, I did want in black and white, but they are black and white. So it's not super hard to imagine a monochrome version of that. But generally, a lot of the time, it will be either I think this will look good, especially long exposures in bad weather. You think this could be pretty good in monochrome. Sometimes it'll be a color photo that just isn't working. It doesn't have the pizzazz that I want it to have, and then I'll try it in black and white, and suddenly it'll be interesting. I actually have a quick example of that I use in my workshops if anyone wants to see it, or we're running short of time. Oh, I can't seem to hear you.
Helps if I unmute myself. Sorry about that.
So I still can't hear you.
We have time. No, you don't fool me with that one. It's normally me that plays those jokes. Yeah, we've got time if you want to pull it up on your screen.
Okay. Let's start sharing.
There's always one point during a show where I forget to unmute myself. It's part of the course.
That was it.
Yeah.
You got my screen there, yeah?
I have. If you just want to hide ourselves, then that's great. There we go. Yep.
Let's see if I can find it. This will also just show how dull photos can be. A good thing is that people will see my work and be like, "Oh, these photos are great." And I'm like, "Thank you very much," but this is a very small amount. If you could see the amount that I delete and I throw away and that I don't post, they're awful. So whenever you see someone that you think is a great photographer, remember that they have a whole bucket full of dirge behind that as well. So if you're not happy with all your images, that's the same with everyone.
Yeah, they just tend to practice more often than have.
Yeah, and you just show your good work, And in fact, even if people go onto my Flickr, I have kept everything up from when I started photography. I know a lot of people will delete their old stuff because it's embarrassing, but I'd rather see when people look back and go, "Oh, you were awful." Yes, I was, but by practicing and keeping at it, I got better. People don't start amazing. There is a progression, and it's good that people see that. So I digress. This was, I think this was Alabama Hills in California. Don't know if anyone's been there. Fantastic place, awful photo. I took this and I had great ideas behind it, and I thought this would be great. I'll just do a few tweaks here, but there's actually nothing to it. There's no real. It's all right, but there's nothing that's really exciting about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried various things, and I tried, all the levels, and every time I looked at it, I was like, it's better than it was, but it's just quite a dull photo.
Yeah.
So then I thought, instead of moving on to the next one, I'll try it in black and white just to see. So I put it in black and white, and immediately I thought, you know what, that's a lot more interesting. For some reason, it just suddenly became more interesting. So I thought, right, let's mess around with the settings again, because when you go to black and white, you've removed color. So contrast and clarity and things like that, you can be a bit more extreme with, because it's not competing with the color. So I thought, let's mess around with a few of these things, and it started to get a bit more exciting. And then when I went on to the black and white, the mix with the different colors, what I tend to do with all my sliders is I yo-yo them, which means I just go big sweeps left to right until I zero in on what I want. Because in my early days, I would do minute adjustments, and I wasn't doing anything. You think it is, but you want to make sure that like no photo has aqua in it. It's not a real color. You can go to any photo in your catalog and you can slide the aqua thing, nothing will change. Like 1 out of 100 will have aqua in it. But so it's true. But so I start to yo-yo all the sliders, and I was working away with this one and seeing what it did, and it's like, oh, that can brighten the foreground, and that brightens that bit. So if I do minute changes, you don't really notice it. But if I do large ones, you can see exactly what it's affecting, and you go, okay, that's that bit. But it's when I got to the blues, and I just started to do this, and as I brought it down, obviously the sky was a bright blue because it was kind of middle of the day, getting towards sunset. And as I dropped that down to make the sky super dark, it just took on this more sort of Ansel Adams type of feeling to it. You know, it also helps that this is the kind of landscapes that he would shoot. You know, he's probably been all around Alabama hills and shot that. But then when I started to do that, it suddenly took, you know, a different feeling onto it, and then I could start to go around, and now I would start to properly do it. But for me, this is a lot more of an exciting photo. And if I reset this, that was just a dull, bad photo.
Yeah. No, the black and white's definitely made it all about the tones, or as I guess Ansel Adams would say, the zonal ranges, the zonal values of the image, and
Yeah, so my tip is, if you're starting with an image and it's not sitting right, don't be afraid to jump into the black and white monochrome settings, and then you can just totally mess around with the colors. Like this, why would I try and make the sky black? Does it make any sense? No. Did I like the final result? Yes, I really did.
Yeah.
And even as soon as you go to black and white, changing the white balance can have a big effect, because it's just changing the range of tones within it, not the colors. So the sky's blue, so if I start to make that, you see if I make the whole thing blue, because I've dropped the blue down, it turns it black. So now you can kind of control the whole brightness just by adding more blue into it. And then by changing the other one, you can start to see that makes big changes.
Really mess about with the tonal values using white balance. And
obviously if then you do these crazy white balance settings and then go back into the color settings, it's going to look awful. It'll probably be, you know, magenta or something. But it doesn't matter when you're shooting in monochrome. So sometimes I plan for monochrome. Long exposures will often be black and white because it has that elegant, timeless feel to it. And then I often use it to save not so interesting images. It's like a crutch. It's a photographer's crutch sometimes.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people that do amazing black and whites, especially street photographers and portrait photographers. And I just can't do that. I can't. For me, it's not my primary way of thinking.
Yeah, we're all so different now. It's incredible. You think about, we've had Alan Schaller on here, incredible ambassador for us here, and great street photographer. Yeah, and he his camera, he uses the Leica monochrome, so only shoots in black and white. But he literally sees in black and white, not because he's colorblind, but just the way his artistic eye is. Not interested in color at all.
Landscape photographers, a lot of my students have said, is it worthwhile shooting in black and white? And I always said to them, no, because if you shoot in black and white on your camera, you have a black and white image. If you shoot in color, you can have color or black and white.
Yeah. It
just gives you that option. Because if you just shoot something that gives you black and white, you're stuck with that. And it could have been amazing in color. So I just like to have the option.
Yeah, there's an interesting technique I use if I'm doing any street photography. I shoot with Fujifilm X cameras, X Pro 2. You can actually have it set up so that it is photographing in monochrome and black and white. The viewfinder is in black and white, the screen's in black and white, but it's capturing a raw file. So the raw file is ultimately in color. But it just helps you not just pre-visualize, but actually visualize what you're seeing as a black and white image, which can be a good technique sometimes.
I think if I did street photography, that's something that I would probably use as well. But I think, again, street photography, a lot of people say to me, you know, I love your landscape photography, it's really good. And that sounds like a boast, it's not really. I find it quite easy. But when it comes to other types of photography, like street photography, I just can't do it. And other people are like, why? It's easy. It's like, it's easy for you. but it's not easy for me. Some people will take a photo of a street scene and it'll be a moment in time. It'll be a snapshot of life and it'll be amazing. And I'll do the same thing and it'll be a bin on a street. And people are like, why have you taken a photo of a bin? I'm like, it's life. And they're like, no, it's not.
Isn't that the great thing about photography? There's just so many genres. You go into Flickr and there's so many groups based around all different genres, and the work's incredible. And some of these things I'd never even thought of as a genre, and it's really inspiring to see all these different things. So, but
a lot of
ultimately, you can be good at just one.
Yeah, a lot of my photography friends and people I admire are very creative, and they do the photo montages and the manipulations and have scenes that they've created out of their mind, and it's phenomenal. With like a little person in a bottle climbing out, or things like that. You'll see a lot of them in the Flickr Explore.
Yeah.
And I just wouldn't have the imagination for that. If someone said to me, we want this kind of photo, I could probably do it. But if someone said, use your imagination and design something in a photo, but a bin on the street, that would be mine. Like a massive bin.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing your next bin on the street shot. We'll keep an eye out for that on the Explore pages.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm conscious of the time. It is Friday. We've all got the weekend to look forward to, a long weekend for many of us. But before we get to our final thanks for Conor, I just want to remind you that you can do us a big favour by hitting that subscribe button, hit the little bell notification. That way you'll be notified of all the episodes we've got coming up here. Join us next week for some great episodes. We've got Neil Freeman joining us next week from the Nikon school or Nikon school, depending on what part of the world you're from. We'll be looking at some portrait photographer with Neil. But if you've enjoyed what you've been listening today, give us a little thumbs up here on YouTube as well. We really appreciate your support. Conor, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate it. It's always good to catch up with you. Yeah.
Yes, it's been enjoyable. It's more than I'd normally do on a Friday night, so that's good.
Yeah, but we normally try and do these on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but this week to fit in with our schedules, I'm glad you were able to join us today. But wherever you are in the world, folks, have a great day, and we will see you back here next week for another episode of SmugMug Live. Conor, take care, my friend. Look after yourself. Be good.
Yes, take care, everyone. Wear your masks.
Take care. Bye.